Hello and welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Ruth Watson. Ukraine update, day 119. Ukraine's army said it launched airstrikes on Zmyny Island, also known as Snake Island, causing significant losses to Russian forces. The military situation for Ukraine's defenders in the eastern Donbass is extremely difficult.
Yes, sir.
I'm terribly sorry, I've lost my sound. Technical issues. The military situation for Ukraine's defenders in the eastern Donbass is extremely difficult, officials have said. There are 568 civilians thought to be holed up in Severodonetsk Azot chemical plant as Russian attacks intensify in an effort to capture Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Russian forces have captured several settlements near Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. The head of the Severodonetsk District Military Administration, Roman Vlasenko, said the frontline village of Toshkivka had not been under Ukrainian control since Monday. Russian forces also reportedly captured Tbilisi and Maladolyina, located southwest of Severodonetsk, and saw success near the Hyrska settlement in Pan. A Russian missile strike has left at least one person dead in the southern Ukrainian port city of Mykolaiv, according to its mayor, Alexander Senkevich. The attack caused several fires and damaged a number of buildings, including a school, Senkevich said on national television. Casualties to the forces of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR, one of Russia's proxies in eastern Ukraine, may have amounted to about 55% of the original strength, the intelligence has claimed. Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, said its staff had seen evidence of a shocking level of indiscriminate violence being inflicted on civilians in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to mark the day when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941. Moscow's response to Lithuania's ban on the transit of goods sanctioned by the EU to the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad will not be exclusively diplomatic, but practical in nature, Foreign Ministry Press Secretary Maria Zakharova has said. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Rabyov, has warned the West to stop talking about triggering NATO's Article 5 mutual defence clause in the standoff between Lithuania and Russia. Finland's Armed Forces Chief, General Timo Kalvinen, says his country was prepared for a Russian attack and would put up stiff resistance in the event that one should occur. Europe needs to prepare immediately for Russia to turn off all gas exports to the region this winter, according to the head of the International Energy Agency, who has called on governments to work on reducing demand and keeping nuclear power plants open. German self-propelled howitzers have arrived in Ukraine in the first delivery of heavy weapons promised by Berlin. We have replenishment, Ukraine's Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov announced. The German Panzer Howitzer 2000 with trained Ukrainian crews joined the Ukrainian artillery family. Proposals to repeal the Human Rights Act are a shocking and unnecessary attempt to remove safeguards afforded to every member of society, Equalities Minister Christina McKelvey has said. Putting on record the Scottish Government's unequivocal opposition to the UK Government's Bill of Rights, published today, Ms McKelvey stressed that the Scottish Parliament would have to agree to any changes affecting the devolution settlement. Ms McKelvey said, "This shocking and unnecessary legislation seeks to put UK ministers above some of the most fundamental checks and balances that underpin our democracy. The fact remains that we do not need a new Bill of Rights. The Human Rights Act is one of the most important laws passed by the UK Parliament. For more than 20 years, it has delivered fairness and justice, protecting our rights to privacy and liberty, freedom of expression and peaceful protest. It has prevented discrimination, inhumanity and abuse of power. The UK government's Rwanda policy has been challenged in the European Court of Human Rights. This legislation appears to be part of the response, an attempt to remove safeguards protecting every member of our society. As a founding signatory of the European Convention on Human Rights, the UK government should be championing international human rights standards and the rule of law Instead, its ministers appear intent on damaging the UK government's global reputation. I would urge them to stop this act of vandalism, which will have an impact on public bodies that must adhere to it. The UK government must also remain fully committed to the European Convention on Human Rights and to membership of the Council of Europe, Ms McKelvey continued. The Human Rights Act is built into the heart of the devolution settlement, and any legislation that breaches the Act has no force in law. Let me make it clear that it would therefore be wholly unacceptable to make changes affecting Scotland without the explicit agreement of the Scottish Parliament. I am proud that the Scottish Government is treading a different path, showing human rights leadership by protecting and enhancing our rights and freedoms, with plans for future Scottish legislation to extend devolved human rights safeguards even further, as McKelvey concluded. A race to the bottom in standards across a range of issues, including workers' rights, food and the environment, could be triggered under the UK government's latest post-Brexit plans, Constitution Secretary Angus Robertson has told Parliament. The UK government intends to introduce the so-called Brexit Freedoms Bill, which says it will mean EU legacy law, kept on the statute book after Brexit, can be more easily amended or removed. More than 2,000 pieces of legislation could be affected, covering matters including product standards, consumer protection, genetically modified foods, and transport safety. The scale and breadth of the UK government's proposals would have massive implications for Scotland and put the Scottish government's policy of aligning with EU standards at risk, Mr. Robertson said in a parliamentary statement. Mr. Robertson added, while the UK government has declined to share details of the Brexit Freedoms Bill with us, we should be under no illusion about the risk it presents to Scotland. The main purpose of the bill appears to be the UK government the freedom to abandon legislation that has protected Scottish interests for almost 50 years. It will create uncertainty for business, threatens to fire the starting pistol in a race to the bottom on standards, from food, the environment, animal and plant health to workers' rights. The list of EU retained legislation and regulations published by the UK government includes environmental product standards, product safety standards, consumer protection, employment law, climate change regulations, environmental stewardship, agri-food, genetically modified food and organics, environmental standards, water quality, air quality, noise control, hazardous waste regulation, animal welfare, biosecurity, plant health, vehicle standards, rail safety, aviation safety, passenger rights, human medicines, and food hygiene. UK inflation has increased to 9.1%, the highest rate in 40 years, amid record prices for petrol and the soaring cost of food. The figures from the Office for National Statistics showed an increase in May from 9% in April, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, in a reading that matched the forecasts of city economists. In a fresh high, the headline inflation rate has hit a level not seen since February 1982, piling pressure on households in the cost of living crisis. Inflation is being fueled by food and non-alcoholic drink prices, which are rising at the fastest annual rate since 2009, the ONS said, with the most dramatic increase seen in the cost of bread, cereals, and meat. Soaring prices for petrol and diesel also drove up inflation in May, adding to the pressure on motorists and business costs, with a 32.8% jump in motor fuels over the past year, the biggest annual increase on records dating back to 1989. Prices have risen further in the past month, hitting a fresh record on Tuesday, with the average price of petrol increasing to 189.33, according to the RAC. The cost of filling up a typical family car rose above £100 for the first time this month. Diesel also reached another new high this week, hitting 197.11. The ONS said the retail price index, which is typically higher than the CPI, rose 11.7% in May. SNP Treasury spokesperson Alison Thewliss MP has said that by failing to bring in meaningful financial support, the Tories at Westminster have made it clear they are callous and uncaring, and independence is the only way Scotland can rid itself of them and help households through the Tory-made cost of living crisis. The new figure shows two contrasting reports. One, published today by the Resolution Foundation, showed that Brexit is making the UK poorer, and another, published by the Scottish Government last week, demonstrating that Scotland would be better off by joining the ranks of the many small independent neighbouring EU countries continuously outperforming the UK on wealth, happiness and fairness metrics. Commenting, Alison Thewliss MP said, "How many more reports on rising inflation figures do we have to see before the UK government decides to act? Businesses and households can't take much more of this. It's time for the UK government to act, and with haste." In Scotland, using its limited powers and fixed budget, the Scottish Government is taking action to mitigate the Tory government's failures. They have uprated benefits, doubled the Scottish child payment, and are spending £83 million on tackling the UK government's cruel cuts, Ms. Hewlett concluded. During today's Scottish Parliament debate on the cost of living support, Public Finance Minister Tom Arthur announced plans to look at ways of recouping money from owners of second homes and empty homes who have received the £400 payment from the UK government's energy bill support scheme. Mr. Arthur said, "In this cost of living crisis, it is vital resources are directed at those who need it most, so it is clearly wrong second homeowners or those who own long-term empty homes benefit from a second £400 energy rebate. The Scottish Government will work with COSLA and local government to examine how to recover this money, including through a council tax levy. We also will work with them to examine how to use the funds raised to support local cost of living responses on a fair and equitable basis across Scotland." Through the budget for 22-23, the Scottish Government has allocated almost £3 billion to a range of support that will contribute to mitigating the impact of the increased cost of living on households. This includes work to tackle child poverty, reduce inequalities, and support financial well-being, alongside social security payments not available anywhere else in the UK. The UK government holds most of the powers needed to tackle the cost of living crisis, Mr. Arthur continued, both in the immediate and longer term, including over energy, the minimum wage, national insurance, and 85% of social security spending. The Scottish Government has continually urged the UK Government to use all its powers and fiscal headroom to address the cost of living crisis. Staying with the cost of living crisis, the UK cost of living crisis is being made worse by Brexit, dragging down the country's growth potential and costing workers hundreds of pounds a year in lost pay, new research claims. The Resolution Foundation think tank and academics from the London School of Economics said the average worker in Britain was now on course to suffer more than £470 in lost pay each year by 2030 after rising living costs are taken into account, compared with a Remain vote in 2016. In a report 6 years on from the Brexit referendum, the researchers said Brexit was damaging the competitiveness of UK exports on the world stage, just as companies are forced to deal with the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine, pushing inflation to historic levels. The report from the Resolution Foundation and the LSE said Brexit would weigh heavily on productivity gains over the coming years, up to 2030, while suggesting that higher import costs were adding to the pain for household finances. The study concludes that Brexit is making the UK poorer and will see a reduction in productivity and wages in the decade ahead. Referencing the Scottish Government's Building a New Scotland paper, the SNP's Shadow International Trade Secretary, Drew Henry MP, said that the impact of Brexit proved Scotland would be better joining the ranks of the many small independent neighbouring countries continuously outperforming the UK on wealth, happiness and fairness metrics. Mr. Henry said that the Scottish Government's plan for their independence would allow Scotland to make the most of its potential to create a more prosperous, fairer and happier country. Mr. Henry said, This report lays bare the reality of the Tories' Brexit obsession and the devastating impact it is having on life in the UK nearly 6 years to the day from the vote. In stark contrast to the Scottish Government's paper on independence, which compared the UK economic performance to the success of small independent neighbouring nations, this report highlights how the Tories' Brexit obsession is harming our trading potential. And it's little wonder, Mr. Hendry continued, other countries are outperforming the UK on almost every metric, given the Tories' desire to close the UK off from the world, a move which is reducing the UK's competitiveness and productivity. The US government has warned that Boris Johnson's move to unilaterally axe some of the Northern Ireland Brexit arrangement protocols was a matter of continuing concern and not conducive to a trade deal. Senior officials have hit back at suggestions that the lack of public commentary by the Biden administration meant that it was not troubled by the move to bring in new laws to ditch part of the Brexit deal signed in 2020. They said the administration recognized there were challenges with the protocol, but added that unilateral action was not in anyone's best interests. It is fair to say that the administration has concerns about the legislation. The administration does not believe that unilateral steps are going to be the most effective way to address the challenges facing the implementation of the protocol, and that our strong desire remains to see the UK and the EU return to talks and find a negotiated settlement, a senior administration official said. The remarks came after the UK government defied a chorus of criticism and the threat of a trade war with the EU to push ahead with legislation to enable unilateral action and scrap checks on goods going into Northern Ireland from Great Britain as mandated under the Northern Irish Protocol. They also put paid to inferences that the criticism by a recent bipartisan congressional delegation was limited to the Irish caucus on Capitol Hill and heavily influenced by Sinn Féin. The Biden administration has also clarified remarks by the White House spokesperson last week that there would be no link between the UK's unilateral action and trade talks between Washington and London. According to reports, a White House insider commented, "It is true there is no formal linkage between the protocol and a free trade agreement, but the current situation does not create a conducive environment." The senior source added, "I think as a broad matter, it's a desire to avoid unilateral approaches and see a return to negotiations, to be able to reach a negotiated agreement with the EU that's adopted in UK law." The Biden administration conveyed its concerns to the Northern Ireland Minister, Conor Burns, when he was dispatched to Washington to convince the White House that the move was necessary because the protocol risked a return to violence. Doctors have denied that an American woman on holiday in Malta, Doctors have denied an American woman on holiday in Malta a potentially life-saving abortion, despite saying her baby had zero chance of survival after she was admitted to hospital with severe bleeding in her 16th week of pregnancy. Despite an extreme risk of hemorrhage and infection, doctors at the Mater Dei Hospital in Mista told Andrei Prudente that they would not perform a termination because of the country's total ban on abortion. Ms. Prudente and her husband are seeking a medical transfer from Malta to the UK, which the couple say is their only option due to the risk to her life. The UK medical staff were uncooperative in their attempts to leave and in sharing medical records with the couple's insurance company. Activists in Malta say the case has alarming echoes of the treatment of Savita Halapanava, who died of sepsis in an Irish hospital in 2012 after doctors refused a request to terminate her pregnancy when she began to miscarry at 17 weeks, due to the abortion ban that was in place in Ireland then. Malta is the only country in the EU to ban abortion under any circumstances. The only options for those seeking to end a pregnancy on the island nation are to buy illegal abortion medication online or seek a termination overseas. Ms. Prudente, 38, was on holiday with her partner, Jay Wiltrea, 45, on the island of Gozo on the 12th of June, when she began bleeding heavily in the night. Doctors in Gozo prescribed her a drug to protect against miscarriage, but 2 days later they were back in Malta, the main island. Ms. Prudente's waters broke and she was admitted to St. Thomas Hospital, where she was told her placenta had become partially detached. A follow-up ultrasound 48 hours later found there was no amniotic fluid left in her womb, and the couple were told the baby could not survive. They were also told that because of Malta's abortion law, there was nothing doctors could do to end the pregnancy as long as the fetus had a heartbeat. Ms. Prudenti was transferred to Mater Dei Hospital, where she was additionally diagnosed with a ruptured membrane and an umbilical cord that was protruding from her cervix, putting her at even greater risk of hemorrhage and infection. She also tested positive for COVID-19. She's been kept in COVID isolation and receiving antibiotics to ward off infection. J. Dreyer said medical staff came to check for a fetal heartbeat every day. Laura Dimitrijevic, founder of Malta Women's Rights Foundation and a lawyer representing Ms. Prudenti, said the hospital only provided medical records after she intervened, which has delayed the transfer to the UK. The Women's Rights Foundation filed a judicial protest last week on behalf of 188 women, claiming the Maltese government's blanket ban on abortion breached their right to health, privacy and equality. The foundation is now preparing to launch a case challenging the constitutional ban. Mr. Wheeldreyer said the couple had no idea that Malta had an abortion ban when they booked the holiday. Ms. Prudenti said she was desperate to get off the island and receive appropriate medical care, but also wanted to raise awareness of the situation in Malta to prevent others suffering in the way she had. A powerful earthquake in a remote area of Afghanistan's Paktika province has killed at least 1,000 people and injured at least 1,500, with a toll expected to rise in the impoverished country. According to Taliban officials, hundreds more were injured in what appeared to have been the deadliest quake in 2 decades, striking during the night, with heavy rain hampering rescue efforts. Footage from Paktika showed people being carried into helicopters to be airlifted from the area. Others were treated on the ground. One resident could be seen receiving IV fluids while sitting in a plastic chair outside the rubble of his home, and still more were sprawled on stretchers. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, Bilal Karimi, a deputy spokesperson for the Taliban government, called for aid agencies to assist with emergency efforts. We urge all aid agencies to send teams to the area immediately to prevent further catastrophe, he said. In response, the United Nations and the European Union have offered help. Interagency assessment teams have already been deployed to a number of affected areas, tweeted the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs in Afghanistan. Thomas Nicholson, the EU Special Envoy for Afghanistan, tweeted, "The EU is monitoring the situation and stands ready to coordinate and provide EU emergency assistance to people and communities affected." Prime Minister Mohammed Hassan Ahmed convened an emergency meeting at the Presidential Palace to coordinate the relief efforts victims of Paktika and Khost, a neighbouring province. Earlier, Abdul Wahid Rayyan, the Director General of the Bakhtar News Agency, said the areas hit by the earthquake were in mountainous regions, meaning rescue work required helicopters. The centre of the earthquake, estimated by Pakistan to have a magnitude of 6.1 and 5.9 by the U.S. Geological Survey, occurred 30 miles southwest of the city of Khost. It occurred at the relatively shallow depth of 6 miles, worsening its impact. Tremors were noticed in the neighbouring countries, with strong and long jolts felt in the Afghan capital, Kabul, according to a resident who posted on the website of the European Mediterranean Seismological Centre. Rescue efforts are likely to be complicated since many international aid agencies left Afghanistan after the Taliban took control last year and the chaotic withdrawal of the US military from the longest war in its history. The disaster comes as Afghanistan grapples with a severe economic crisis that has gripped it since the Taliban takeover. A new programme of preparedness to test Scotland's response to and recovery from severe weather ahead of the next winter period will be run over this summer. The Winter Preparedness Programme will be led by the Scottish Resilience Partnership, the SRP, and is one of a series of measures developed by the Scottish Government and resilience partners following Storm Arwen to ensure Scotland is better prepared for significant weather events. Other measures resulting from the review include a new online training and learning hub to help individuals, community groups, and the voluntary sector to prepare for and respond to recover from emergencies. The development of a new process to monitor and evaluate Scotland's resilience system annually to ensure issues are identified and resolved quickly and effectively out with severe weather events. An information sharing system to identify and provide support for vulnerable people in an area affected by severe weather, increased integration and engagement with voluntary sector, and expansion of local directories of assets and capabilities to support resilience activity. Deputy First Minister John Swinney said, "The purpose of the Storm Arwen review was to ensure lessons were learned and translated into real change to ensure Scotland's collective resilience approach to future severe weather events is as robust as possible." The existing Scottish Government and partner arrangements at national, regional and local levels are underpinned by the same fundamental aim: to keep the people of Scotland safe from danger and ensure our communities are resilient and able to bounce back from challenging disruptions. Eligible 16 to 24-year-olds who are already receiving certain other benefits or tax credits are being encouraged to apply for Job Start payments, a one-off payment worth £267.65 or £428.25 if the applicant has children. Job Start payment helps young people with the cost of starting a job after a period of being unemployed. The payment can help with the cost of travel, work clothes or childcare. Speaking at Start Scotland, which delivers an employability programme supporting young people in Edinburgh, Minister for Social Security Ben McPherson said, "Our Job Start payment provides financial support for eligible young people who are starting a new job. We have provided this payment since the summer of 2020 and want to see even more people making use of it, particularly given the current cost of. The payment is designed to support young people with the cost of starting a new job by relieving financial pressures at their first paycheck. We are also helping young people access education and employment by providing travel to all under 22-year-olds. This will help young people while cutting commuting costs for people starting a new job, meaning that young people can use their Job Start payment to pay for other costs. I would encourage anyone who thinks they may be eligible to find out more from Social Security Scotland and apply for this benefit, which is only available in Scotland," Mr McPherson concluded. As we come to the end of tonight's programme, I would just like to thank you on behalf of the whole team at Broadcasting Scotland. A big thanks. To everyone who supported our emergency fundraiser, we have been overwhelmed by your generosity and support. We have now set ourselves a target of adding 500 new subscribers and then grow the number of Broadcasting Scotland supporters to a level that will enable us to employ staff and make more programmes, crucial as we look towards 2023. There are several ways to support Broadcasting Scotland. You can subscribe, you can share, and you can hit the donate button on our website, which remains active as we continue to be grateful for all the donations we receive. I'm Ruth Watson. Thank you very much for watching Scotland at 7.